Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Faith vs. Business. I have a very simple yet very profound message for you today. I've just spent the last 6 days in a cabin in the woods with three of my best friends, and the way that God just showed up and moved. Maybe y'all caught us all together last week on the live stream. You know that we were all together in person and we were there for 6 days together. And it was just so incredible. The breakthrough that happened, the restoration and healing that happened, all the ways that Holy Spirit just showed up and did what he does, right? And so nearing the end of our time there together, I really was feeling like, okay, now what? Now what do I do? Now that all this has happened, how do I take that back into everyday life and continue in that and sustain these things that have happened? And the Lord just gave me a really simple message. Like I said, this message I'm going to share with you today just comes straight from God. This is not Susan. This is all him and what he taught me. And it's simple because the things that he wants for us are simple, right? He gives simple instruction that doesn't make it easy. um, but it's very plain and to the point. And I remember getting done with this and thinking, is that it? That's all I've got to do? And he's like, yeah, that's what we're doing. I'm like, okay, that's what we're doing. So if you could see my paper at the top, I've got game plan, because I was like, what is the game plan for returning home? What is the game plan? What does it look like to take this back into my normal life, right? When the retreat's done and we're back in the day to day. And I think a lot of people maybe struggle with this as well. Like if you go to a conference for a few days and you're like, oh, that was incredible. Now I want that to just continue. How do I do that? What do I do with the information? What is the game plan going back home? How do you apply this? What does it look like? And so that's what the Lord showed me. And it's from Deuteronomy 8. And he's had me in Deuteronomy 8 almost the entirety of this year, different sections at a time, going through different verses at a time. And so this is from Deuteronomy 8, verses 1 through 3. And I wrote it all out here in my notebook. I hand wrote I know nobody puts pen to paper anymore, but you can see I hand wrote it. And then I wrote the verses out, and then I went back and asked Holy Spirit to highlight to me, what do I need to know? What do I need to glean from this at this point in time for this game plan? And so that's what I did. So verse 1 says, all the commandments which I command you this day, you shall be watchful to do, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land which the Lord swore to give to your fathers. And if you've got a piece of paper, just write this down, okay? Deuteronomy 8, 1 through 3. And the words I underlined, you may want to write these down too. Watchful, live, multiply, possess. Okay. Verse 2, and you shall remember all the ways which the Lord your God led you these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble you and to prove you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. So verse 2, I underlined, remember, God led you, humble you, prove you, to know. That's important, and we'll come back to that. Verse 3, he humbled you and allowed you to hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you recognize that man does not live by bread only, but man lives by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord. And so in verse 3, again, humbled, allowed, hunger, fed, recognize, and put out parentheses next to recognize, know by experience. I looked up in the Hebrew, and the word for recognize there actually means to know by experience. So it's not a head knowledge, it's not a knowledge of or a knowing of, it's an experience of, that he might make you experience. Okay? Man lives by every word. I wrote down that phrase, or I underlined that phrase, man lives by every word. And then proceeds, again, I looked at the Hebrew for proceeds, and it's a going forth from the source. And that's really important. It's not just a going forth, but the root word of that Hebrew word indicates capital S, source, as in God himself, okay? So what I took from this, what my game plan is, what he says to me, do you want to live? Do you want to multiply? Do you want to possess the land that I've given you? Then be watchful and remember the ways I've already led you. Remember the ways that you have already come through. Remember the ways, right? Because the proving, right, in verse 2, where it talks about humbling you and proving you, that's not for him, right? He already knows what your heart motive is. The proving is for you to know, for you to have confidence, not only in the process that he takes you through, but to build trust and faith with him. And it's a proving to yourself. I trust God. I know he's faithful. He's worthy of my yes, right? The proving and the humbling is for you. That process is for you to grow and mature. So it's not for him, even though it's written in this way. It sounds like God's doing it for him so that he will know your heart. He already knows your heart, right? And that's what he showed me here. I already know your heart, Susan. I already know it. I did that so that you would know your heart, so that you would know your motives, so you would trust not only me, but you would trust yourself, that you would trust the things you're hearing that come from me, right? He humbled me. He's allowed me to hunger, but then he showed himself faithful and he fed me, right? And so verse 3, again, going back to verse 1, do you want to live? Do you want to multiply? Do you want to possess the land? This is how you do it. You humble yourself. You allow him to take you through the proving process, the refining process. And then what comes out of that, in verse 3, we see what comes out of that is that you are able to recognize, because you know by experience that you can only operate in what God says to do and who God says you are, right? Being and doing, not just doing. Recognize, know by experience. Man lives by every word that springs forth, goes forth from the source, from God himself. That is what sustains you. And so he showed me this as a game plan, and I'm like, Lord, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's all I need. I don't need the details. I don't need the steps. I don't need a 1, 2, 3, because we've already been through the proving process. Because I already know that I can trust you. And so my game plan at this point is to just keep my ear to his mouth, keep my ear to his lips, keep my eyes focused on Jesus, and listen to every word that he utters. That's the game plan. That's how we sustain these great revelations that we have, this life that he's designed for us, the identity of who he's called us to be. That's how you sustain it and operate it in it on a daily basis, is when you stay in constant communion with him, when you are in continual conversation with him, when you are asking for, Lord, give me a heightened awareness of our union, of our oneness together. Help me continually to remember that I am in you and you are in me. And we're always about our Father's business, right? That's what Jesus says. That's what he prays for us, that we would know, that we be one. And we know we're one as Jesus and the Father are one. So there's the game plan. I appreciate you hanging out with me today. If you enjoyed this, share it with somebody if it really spoke to you, or if you just feel like I want to do that, but I don't know how to do that. Just leave me a comment, ask your questions. I'm happy to answer questions. You can also go to my website if you want to see what it looks like to work with me. It's heaventoearthllc.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you want to learn more about me or any of my guests, all of the links are in the description below the video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share it on all your social pages. Until next time, remember that you have the power to multiply life without burnout.